I spent 3 years hunting the man who deserted my unit. When I found him living under a false name in a village 200 miles from anywhere that mattered, I finally understood why he ran. And I wish to God I'd never found him at all. His name was Danny Reeves. My name is Marcus Webb. And this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the people who break the rules are the only ones following their conscience. We deployed to Afghanistan together in 2019. Third tour for me, second for Danny. We weren't friends exactly. He was too quiet, too serious, the kind of guy who thought too much about everything. But he was solid, the kind of soldier you wanted on your six because he never panicked, never rushed, never took unnecessary risks. Our unit was stationed at a forward operating base in Helmand Province. Small operation, maybe 40 of us total, working with local forces to secure a region that had seen fighting on and off for 20 years. The kind of place where the war felt old and tired, where everyone just wanted to get through their rotation and go home. Danny was our communications specialist, handled all our encrypted traffic, coordinated with command, managed our intel feeds, position of trust, which made what he did even harder to understand. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays we always got supply runs, and I was looking forward to the coffee shipment. Danny had morning watch on comms. Around 0600, he logged an incoming transmission from command, routine traffic, or so the logs said. By 800, he was gone. Not just gone from his post, gone from the base entirely. Took his personal gear, his weapon, 3 days of rations, and disappeared into the countryside like smoke. Lieutenant Morrison found the discrepancy first. Danny's bunk was made military neat, his locker cleaned out, his personal effects packed and labeled with our names for distribution, like he'd planned it, like he knew exactly what he was doing. The note he left was short. "I'm sorry, I can't be part of this. Tell my sister I love her." That was it. No explanation, no justification, just desertion in the middle of a combat zone, leaving us one man down and our communications compromised because he'd wiped the logs before he left, deleted the morning transmission entirely. Command went ballistic. Desertion is rare enough that it makes waves all the way up the chain. They launched an investigation, sent MPs to interview everyone in the unit, treated the whole thing like a potential security breach, which it was. But what burned me wasn't the military response, it was the personal betrayal. Because 3 weeks before Danny disappeared, we'd sat together during a sandstorm, waiting it out in a supply bunker. He'd shown me pictures of his sister's new baby, talked about teaching the kid to fish when he got home. Seemed happy, seemed solid, seemed fine. And then he just left us. The investigation went nowhere. No trace of Danny, no indication where he'd gone, no communication with family or friends back home. It was like he'd vanished into the Afghan desert. Eventually, the case went cold. We finished our deployment. I came home, but I couldn't let it go. I need to tell you something about myself. I've always been the kind of person who needs answers, needs things to make sense. My ex-wife used to say it was my worst quality, that I couldn't just accept that some things don't have neat explanations. She was probably right. It's why we're divorced. When I got back stateside, I started digging, used contacts in the military, called in favors with intelligence guys I'd worked with, spent my off hours building a file on Danny Reeves, his background, his family, his known associates, everything I could find. His service record was clean. Not just clean, exemplary. 2 Bronze Stars, commendations for valor, positive reviews from every commanding officer he'd served under. No red flags, no warning signs, no indication he was anything other than a model soldier. His personal life was equally normal. Grew up in rural Oregon, enlisted at 20, sent money home to help his single mother and younger sister. No criminal record, no history of mental health issues, no extremist affiliations. Just a regular guy who apparently snapped for no reason. I became obsessed. started taking leave time to chase leads, interviewed people from his hometown, talked to guys from his first deployment, tried to find any pattern, any clue that would explain what happened. My captain called me in after 6 months, sat me down in his office and asked me point blank if I was okay. Told me I needed to move on, that Danny Reeves was gone and probably lying low in some Afghan village or long since captured by hostiles. I told him I was fine. Told him I'd drop it. I lied.
Before I go further, if you're hooked on this story, hit that like button and subscribe. There are dozens more voices like mine here. And drop a comment with your country. I'm curious where all of you are listening from. The break came 18 months in. I'd been monitoring financial records. You can't disappear completely without money, and Danny's military pay was still being deposited into his account monthly, unclaimed but tracked. Then one day, a withdrawal, small, just $200, from an ATM in Kabul. Then nothing for 3 months. Then another withdrawal, different location, same amount. He was alive, and he was still in Afghanistan. I requested another deployment. Command was skeptical. I'd already done 3 tours, and my psych eval was borderline. But they needed experienced NCOs, and I had the language skills and regional knowledge they valued. They approved me for a training advisory role in Kabul. I spent my off-duty hours tracking those ATM withdrawals. They formed a pattern if you looked close enough. Small amounts, irregular timing, but always in the same general region. A rural area north of Kabul, near the Panjshir Valley. Not hostile territory exactly, but remote. The kind of place where foreigners could disappear if they wanted to. I started making trips out there. Told my unit I was building local contacts, developing intelligence sources, which was true, just not for the reasons they thought. The villages in that region were tight-knit. Everyone knew everyone, and strangers were noticed. But I had something going for me. I looked Afghan enough with the right clothes and a good beard, and I spoke Dari well enough to pass if I didn't talk too much. I asked questions carefully, about foreigners, about anyone new who'd arrived in the past 2 years, about Americans who might be living off the grid. Most people shut down when I asked, but in the 5th village I visited, an old man at a tea house studied my face for a long moment, then said something that made my pulse spike. "The teacher," he said. "You're looking for the teacher." Turns out, Danny had been living in a village called Karya for over a year. Not hiding exactly, but not advertising his presence either. The locals knew he was American, knew he was former military, but they protected him anyway, because he'd saved their lives. The old man at the tea house wouldn't tell me more, said I needed to see the teacher myself, hear the story firsthand. Gave me directions to Karya and warned me that if I came with bad intentions, I wouldn't leave the village. I went alone, didn't tell my unit where I was going, just took a local bus into the mountains, wearing civilian clothes, carrying nothing that would identify me as American military. Karya was smaller than I expected, maybe 200 people total, built into a hillside with terraced fields below and mountains above. Simple houses, a mosque, a school building that looked relatively new. Danny was teaching English to a classroom of children when I found him. He saw me through the window before I entered. His face went pale, but he didn't run. Just dismissed the class calmly, sent the kids home, and waited for me at the door. He'd lost weight, grown his beard out, had sunlines around his eyes that made him look older than 27, but it was definitely him. "Hey, Marcus," he said quietly. "I wondered if it would be you who found me." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hit him. Part of me wanted to arrest him right there. Part of me just wanted to understand. "Why?" I managed finally. "Just tell me why." He looked past me at the village, at the mountains beyond, then back at me. "Come on, I'll show you." We walked to a compound at the edge of the village. Families were living there, maybe 40 people total, mostly women and children. They stared at me with a mix of curiosity and suspicion, but they greeted Danny warmly. The kids ran up to him, pulling at his clothes, chattering in Dari. He spoke to them gently, then led me inside one of the houses.
sat me down and poured tea with hands that shook slightly. The transmission I got that morning, the one I deleted from the logs, it was a strike order. My stomach tightened. Strike on what? This village, Karya. Command had intelligence that a high-value target was meeting here with Taliban commanders. They wanted a drone strike, surgical and fast, before the target could relocate. So, that's the mission, if there was a legitimate target. There wasn't. His voice was flat, hard. Marcus, I processed that intelligence. I read the source material. It was garbage. Single source, unverified, no corroboration. The kind of intel that should never greenlight a strike, let alone on a civilian village. I wanted to argue, but something in his tone made me hesitate. Danny had always been meticulous about intel, had caught bad information before, saved us from walking into traps. I tried to push back, he continued, sent queries up the chain, requested additional verification, asked for time to confirm the target. Got shut down hard. The strike was authorized at the highest level, and it was happening within 12 hours whether I questioned it or not. He stared at his tea. I had a choice, Marcus. I could follow orders and let 200 innocent people get vaporized based on intelligence I knew was false, or I could break every rule I'd ever sworn to uphold. You could have kept pushing, gone to the Inspector General, filed a formal complaint. There wasn't time. The strike window was dawn the next morning, and I knew in my gut that even if I reported it, nothing would stop. The machinery was already moving. He looked at me directly. So I ran, took a motorcycle from the local forces, drove through the night, got here 3 hours before sunrise, woke up the village elder and told him everyone needed to evacuate immediately, told him American drones were coming and they had maybe 2 hours to get to the mountain caves. I felt cold. Danny. They thought I was crazy at first. Some random American soldier shows up in the middle of the night warning about airstrikes. But the elder was smart. He'd lived through enough wars to know you don't ignore warnings like that. He got everyone moving. Danny's hands clenched around his cup. They made it to the caves with 40 minutes to spare. At 0617, right on schedule, 2 Hellfire missiles turned this village into rubble. Now here's where everything changed. But real quick, if you're invested in how this ends, I genuinely appreciate a subscription. More soldier stories drop daily. Comment your country below. Always amazes me how far these reach. I sat there trying to process what he told me, trying to reconcile the Danny I'd known with the man sitting across from me, trying to understand how a textbook desertion could possibly be justified. The aftermath, I said slowly. Command must have realized the intel was bad when they found the village empty. Danny laughed, not a happy sound. You'd think, but no. The official report classified the strike as a success, claimed they'd eliminated the high-value target and several Taliban commanders, never mind that the only thing they actually hit was empty buildings. That's not possible. There are procedures, verification. Marcus, he leaned forward. Someone wanted this village destroyed. Not because of any target, because of what the people here knew. He stood and walked to the window, pointed at the mountains. 3 months before the strike order, a mining company sent surveyors through this region. International operation, but backed by American investors. They found mineral deposits worth potentially billions, rare earth elements, the kind used in electronics and batteries. I followed his gaze to the mountains. The company offered to buy the village land. The elder refused. This was ancestral territory, homes their families had lived in for generations. They weren't selling. So the company decided to just eliminate them? That's conspiracy theory nonsense. Is it? Danny pulled out a folder from beneath the floorboard, old, worn, filled with documents. I've spent 2 years tracking the paper trail. The intel that triggered the strike came from a contractor working for the mining company. The authorization signatures went through officials who had financial stakes in the operation. The post-strike report falsifying the results was filed by someone who's now on the mining company's board. He handed me the folder. Read it yourself. It's all there. This wasn't a military operation. It was corporate-sponsored elimination. I went through the documents slowly. financial records, corporate filings, intelligence reports with metadata showing their origin, communication logs. The picture they painted made me sick. Why didn't you expose this? Why hide here instead of blowing the whistle? You think I didn't try? The first 6 months I was here, I sent everything I had to every oversight body I could think of: Inspector General, military investigators, journalists, congressional offices. And nothing. Radio silence. Then 3 months in, I got a message through a contact in military intelligence, unofficial, off the books, told me if I valued my life and the lives of anyone I cared about, I'd stay disappeared. Told me there were people with serious money invested in making sure this story never came to light. He pulled up his shirt, showed me a scar across his ribs, still pink and recent. That's from 4 months ago. 2 guys on a motorcycle tried to run me off the road. Karya's elders sent some men to help. We made it back to the village, but the message was clear. Someone knows I'm here. Someone wants me quiet. I stared at the documents in my hands, at Danny, at the village outside where children were playing in the dirt streets. So what now? I asked. You just stay here forever? Hide while the people responsible walk free? I've kept copies of everything in multiple locations. If anything happens to me, it all goes public. That's the only leverage I have. And in the meantime, he gestured at the village. I teach their children, help rebuild what was destroyed, try to do some good to balance the scales. That's not enough. No, he agreed quietly, it's not. But it's what I can do without getting everyone in this village targeted again, without putting my sister at risk, without ending up disappeared like the other people who've tried to expose this. He looked at me carefully. So, now you know. You came here to bring me to justice. Are you going to? I sat in that room for 2 hours, wrestling with the hardest decision I'd ever faced. Everything I'd been trained to believe told me that Danny was a deserter, that he'd violated his oath, abandoned his post, betrayed his unit, that he needed to face consequences. But everything I'd learned in those 2 hours told me he'd saved 200 lives, that he'd done the right thing when the system failed, that bringing him in would likely end with him silenced and the truth buried forever. I thought about my ex-wife's words, about needing things to make sense, about being unable to accept that some things don't have neat explanations. This didn't have a neat explanation. There was no answer that made everything okay. The elder, I said finally. I want to talk to him. Danny looked surprised but nodded. I'll arrange it. The elder's name was Ahmadi. He was maybe 70, with a face like carved wood and eyes that had seen too much. He invited me into his home, served me tea, and studied me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. You're the one hunting our teacher, he said in careful English. I was, I admitted. I'm not sure what I am now. He nodded slowly. He told you what happened? Yes. Do you believe him? I considered the question, thought about the documents, about the scar on Danny's ribs, about the rebuilt village that shouldn't exist if the strike had been legitimate. I believe him. Ahmadi sipped his tea. When the soldiers came, when your friend came in the middle of the night, I thought he was a trick. I thought maybe this was how they would justify destroying us, and American warning us to evacuate, then claiming we were warned because we were Taliban. But you evacuated anyway. I looked in his eyes, Ahmadi said simply, and I saw a man willing to lose everything to save people he didn't know. So yes, we evacuated, and when the missiles came, when we watched from the caves as our homes burned, I thanked God for sending us this man. He set down his cup. He's been here 2 years now. He teaches our children English, helps the women learn to read, works in the fields beside our men. He doesn't ask for payment, doesn't ask for gratitude. He just does good. He's wanted by the military, I said. If I report that I found him, then you report it, and men will come and they will take him, and this village will lose our teacher, and perhaps lose more than that if the people who wanted us destroyed the first time decide to finish what they started. He leaned forward. But before you make that choice, I want to show you something. I need to tell you what happened next, But first, if this story's got you, show some love with a like and subscribe. I read every comment, especially love seeing where you're all from around the world. Ahmadi took me to the school building. It was simple, concrete walls, a tin roof, wooden desks, but it was clean and well-maintained, and the walls were covered with children's artwork and English alphabet posters. Before the teacher came, we had no school. The Taliban had destroyed the old one. The children learned what they could from their parents, but most could not read, not write. They had no future beyond farming and fighting. He pointed to a photograph on the wall. A class of students, maybe 20 kids, holding certificates. These are the first students to complete primary education in this village in 15 years. 6 of them will attend secondary school in Kabul next year. 3 girls are included in that number. Before the teacher came, it would have been impossible. We walked to another wall. Medical supplies neatly organized in a cabinet. The teacher arranged for medical deliveries, taught basic first aid. 2 months ago, when a child in the village was bitten by a snake, the teacher's training saved his life. Another corner, agricultural equipment. The teacher helped us contact organizations that donated these tools. Our harvest this year was double what it was before. Families have enough to eat through winter. Ahmadi turned to face me. I'm not asking you to forget your duty. I'm not asking you to betray your conscience. I'm asking you to see the full picture, to understand what you would be taking from us.
I looked at the classroom, at the evidence of lives improved, futures created, hope built from nothing. What would you do, I asked, if you were me? Ahmadi smiled sadly. I would remember that justice and law are not always the same thing, and I would ask myself which one I serve. I stayed in Karya for 3 days, told my unit I was developing intelligence sources, which was technically true. Watched Danny teach, watched the village function, watched the life he'd built from the ashes of his military career. On the 3rd night, we sat on the roof of his small house, looking at stars that felt too bright, too clear. You could come back, I said. Face court-martial, tell your story publicly. You'd have a platform, media attention. The truth might actually come out. Danny shook his head. I'd never make it to trial, you know that. I'd have an accident in custody, or suddenly recant my story, or my evidence would mysteriously disappear. The people behind this have too much at stake to let me talk. So you just hide forever? I'm not hiding, he gestured at the village below. I'm living, doing something that matters, making a difference in a way I never could wearing a uniform. You were a good soldier, Danny. I was a good soldier right up until the moment being a good soldier meant letting innocent people perish. Then I had to choose what kind of man I wanted to be. He looked at me directly. You have to make that choice now too, Marcus. You found me. You know where I am. You could report it, fulfill your duty, bring me in. Or you could walk away, pretend you never found me, let me keep doing the work I'm doing here. If I report you, I'll disappear again before they can get here. I've got routes planned, places I can go, but it'll mean leaving this village, these people, starting over somewhere else, and the pattern repeats. The weight of it settled on my shoulders. Everything I'd spent 3 years working toward, and the answer I'd been chasing turned out to be a question I didn't know how to answer. I left Karya the next morning, told Danny I needed time to think, to process everything I'd learned. He nodded, didn't press, just said he hoped I'd find peace with whatever I decided. The bus ride back to Kabul felt longer than the trip out. I kept replaying conversations in my head, kept looking at the documents Danny had given me, kept thinking about those kids in the classroom, about Ahmadi's words, about the weight of choosing between law and justice. When I got back to base, my captain was waiting. He'd noticed my absences, my off-books travel, my obsession with the Danny Reeves case. Wanted answers. I told him I'd been chasing a lead that didn't pan out. Told him Danny Reeves was probably long gone, either captured by hostiles or dead in some forgotten corner of the country. Told him I was ready to let it go and focus on my actual assignment. He studied my face for a long moment. I don't know if he believed me, but he nodded,
told me to write up a final report and to move on with my life. I wrote the report, classified the case as a dead end, filed it away, and I never mentioned Karya. 6 months later, my deployment ended. I came home to Oregon, processed out of active duty, tried to build some kind of normal life, got a job as a military consultant, dated a teacher named Sarah, adopted a dog, did all the things you're supposed to do when you're trying to move forward. But I couldn't shake it. Couldn't shake the feeling that I'd left something unfinished, that walking away from Danny was both the right choice and the wrong one simultaneously. Sarah noticed. She was perceptive that way, could read my moods better than I could myself. "You're carrying something heavy," she said one night after I had been particularly quiet. "Want to talk about it?" I almost told her, almost explained about Danny and Karya and the choice I'd made, but operational security ran deep, and some stories weren't mine to tell. "Just old war stuff," I said. "It'll pass." It didn't pass. The news broke on a Tuesday, 18 months after I left Afghanistan. Major investigation into corruption in military contracting, evidence of falsified intelligence reports, unauthorized strikes, corporate influence in military operations. I watched the press conference with my heart hammering, watched as investigators laid out a pattern of corruption that matched everything Danny had shown me, watched as officials were named, arrests made, congressional hearings promised. The mining company was mentioned, the strike on Karya was mentioned. The documents Danny had compiled were apparently not as buried as everyone thought. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Did you see the news?" Danny's voice, cautious but alive. "How did you—" Multiple sources, all anonymous, all submitted simultaneously to different agencies and news outlets. Couldn't be stopped or suppressed once it hit critical mass. "You did this." I had help. People who believed the truth mattered more than protecting institutional reputation. People who thought maybe justice was worth risking for. I heard the unspoken question, whether I'd been one of the people who helped. "I didn't report finding you," I said. "I know. Amadi told me. Said you made your choice. Was it the right one?" A long pause, the sound of wind, of distance between us. "I don't know, Marcus. I just know it was the choice you could live with. Same as me." The line went quiet except for that wind. "Are you safe?" I asked. "For now. Might need to move again soon, just to be careful, but the village is okay. The kids are still in school. That matters." "Yeah," I agreed, "it does." "Thank you," Danny said quietly, "for not turning me in, for seeing past what I did to why I did it." "I'm not sure I did the right thing." "None of us are. That's the price of making impossible choices. You never know for certain. You just do what you can live with and hope it's enough." The line disconnected. I never heard from him again. The investigation dragged on for 2 years. Congressional hearings, military court-martials, civilian trials. 5 people went to prison. The mining company lost its government contracts. Reforms were promised, oversight strengthened, procedures changed. Danny Reeves was never mentioned by name. His desertion never connected to the corruption case. As far as official records showed, he was still missing, presumed lost somewhere in Afghanistan. I know better. I know he's out there somewhere, still teaching, still doing what good he can to balance the scales, still living with the choice he made that morning when he ran instead of following orders. And I'm still living with mine. People ask me sometimes about my deployments, about the hard calls I had to make, the things I saw, the experiences that shaped me. I tell them sanitized versions, war stories polished for civilian consumption. I never tell them about Danny Reeves, never explain the 3 years I spent hunting a man who turned out to be more right than I wanted to admit. Never mention the village I could have reported, but didn't. Because here's what I learned. Sometimes the people who break the rules are the only ones following their conscience. Sometimes desertion is the bravest thing a soldier can do. Sometimes justice means walking away from the law. And sometimes the cost of doing the right thing is never knowing for certain if it was right at all. I think about Danny whenever I hear about military corruption cases, whenever I see news about mining operations in Afghanistan, whenever I pass the recruiting office in my town and see young kids signing up to serve their country. I think about the choice I made, the report I didn't file, the man I didn't bring in. I think about Ahmadi asking me which I served, justice or law. And I still don't have a good answer. Sarah and I got married last year. She knows I carry something from my service, something I can't quite articulate. She doesn't push, just holds my hand when the weight gets heavy and reminds me that I'm home now, that whatever happened over there is in the past. But it's not in the past. It's in every decision I make, every time I'm faced with a choice between what's right and what's legal. Danny's story is woven into how I see the world now. The dog I adopted is named Danny. Sarah doesn't know why I chose that name, thinks it was just a friend from my unit. She's not wrong exactly. Last month I got a package, no return address. Inside was a photograph of a classroom. Different village, different country, looked like somewhere in Africa, but the same scene. Kids at desks, a bearded man at the front teaching, everyone smiling. No note, no explanation, but I recognize the eyes of the teacher. He's still out there, still doing the work, still carrying the cost of the choice he made. And I'm still carrying mine. I've told you this story because I need you to understand something. The world isn't simple. Good people sometimes have to break bad rules. Bad people sometimes hide behind good rules, and the rest of us are left trying to figure out which is which. I don't know if I made the right choice. I know I made the choice I could live with, and maybe that's all any of us can do. Danny saved 200 lives when he deserted. He exposed corruption that might have claimed countless more. He sacrificed his career, his freedom, his future for people he didn't know. And I let him go. I chose the man over the mission, justice over law. Some days I think I betrayed everything I stood for. Other days I think I upheld the only things that really mattered. Most days, I just don't know. But I do know this. There's a village in Afghanistan where children learn to read because a soldier chose conscience over orders. There are kids who will grow up to be doctors and teachers and engineers because one man decided innocent lives mattered more than following the chain of command. And there's me, living with the knowledge that I could have ended all of that with one phone call, that I had the power to bring a deserter to justice and chose not to. Was it worth it?
Ask me that question again in 20 years, when those kids Danny taught have built careers and families, when the reforms prompted by his evidence have saved other villages from the same fate, when the president of accountability has maybe, possibly, made the system a little bit better. Ask me then if I regret letting him disappear. I might have an answer by that point. Or I might still be wrestling with the same impossible question. What do you do when doing your duty means betraying your conscience? Danny figured out his answer. He ran. He saved lives. He paid the price. I figured out mine. I walked away. I kept his secret, and I've been paying the price ever since. Not in punishment or consequences, in uncertainty, in the weight of never knowing for absolute certain if I did the right thing. That's the cost of making impossible choices. You carry them forever, and you never get the comfort of certainty. I learned that some truths don't set you free. They just give you something new to carry. And I'll carry Danny Reeves's story and my part in it until the day I stop breathing.